So, in a now semi-viral video on Twitter, I stated about the whole Palworld model debacle that the video and 2 screenshots of a rotating cat model are not enough to prove or disprove plagiarism either way, and that people should wait to come to any conclusions until they have their hands on the models and can look themselves. A few hours later, I was sent the models by somebody else in the industry after we were talking about this in DMs, and I figured it might be nice to return to 2 of the pals in the hot seat at the moment, Boltmain and Azarobe, and attempt to make a more unbiased review of similarities and differences between them and their supposed Pokemon progenitors. There are also a few other choice subjects that people have stated that they would be interested in hearing me chime in about, so here I am. Before we start, however, I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not telling you that these models are or are not plagiarized. My goal is to discuss these models with an objective lens. That being said, the main reason that both models are being prominently discussed online comes from the initial claim that Palworld plagiarized. So a lot of the time, I'm going to be pointing out similarities first before elaborating on whether those similarities actually matter, or ways that they could come about. I have to bring up claims or points of interest first. That does not mean that I'm saying that these are plagiarized. I just have to bring them up first in order to discuss them. That's how the scientific method works. I know I'm probably going to get one death threat from both sides over this, so I don't know why I'm bothering, but there it is. There's my statement of intent. Lastly, and this is important, always get your info from multiple sources. Don't just take my word for it. Don't just take someone else's word for it. Read and research. In no way is this a comprehensive analysis of the entire situation, so seek out supplementary information, and make sure the person that's giving it to you actually knows what the fuck they're talking about. Anyways, welcome to the thread. That's right, this is a thread of videos. Start here, and start scrolling down. Now, the video is over. You can stop watching now. Go to the next video. You can leave. We're gonna start off with our favorite little lion, wolf, the Luxray one. For the sake of this video, I will be using the models from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for Luxray. I wanted to use the ones from Sword and Shield, but I couldn't find them and I wasn't going to go rip them. But before anyone decries some sort of bias from this, here's the 3DS model of Luxray. As you can see, the models are near identical, with a little bit of optimization here and there on the Scarlet and Violet model that actually seems to make it lower poly than the 3DS model. All Pokemon models come from the same database of Pokemon models that were made sometime in around 2011 for the 3DS games. There's an interview that confirms that they always make a high poly reference model and then they make a low poly model from that. Still don't believe me? Check out Luxray's model from Pokédex 3D Pro. Any one of you can do this by going to the models resource and tracking down the Luxray model on DeviantArt for X and Y like I did. I know the Game Freak has made opposite claims since, but it's clearly the same models, okay? They're the same models. Speaking of topology changes not changing whether something has the same common ancestor, let's take a look at the models, shall we? Oh no, I have to change the scale of the model because it's ginormous in order to be visible. Oh god, I'm so fucking biased! That's what you sound like when you say that, by the way. Fun fact, a lot of models have different scales. Another fun fact for you, a lot of those scales are changed in the game engine. I say this out of a place of kindness. If you want to make an argument against plagiarization, make good arguments. Don't talk about things you don't understand. For instance, these models are at the very least not model edits. The proportions are absolutely similar, especially if you remove the head so you can see just the body, the main part of the entire creature. Which I am noting as evidence because as this tweet by L was a mistake put so eloquently, it would be highly unlikely, bordering on impossible, for independently created models to have the same limb and connection proportions. Whether the model needs to be scaled to line up is irrelevant. The joints, eye, body, and tail are proportionally and positionally the same. And for what it's worth, despite misinformation otherwise. The original author claims to have only uniformly scaled the model. But don't just take their word for it, I checked it myself. Shit lines up. And if you don't believe either of us, when the models are available, go ahead and do it yourself. It's not gonna change the fucking answer. For the record, this is not validation of the original video. That original video is bad, explains its points terribly, and focuses on some very superficial points to make an argument that's absolutely terrible. The fact that there's a way to scale up this model in which they are the same height, where in which the chest is nearly the exact same size, where in which the front and back legs come out in nearly the exact same area, where in which the neck is about at the same starting area, and the tail is at the exact same level as the other tail, shows me that there was something going on. But that doesn't mean it's a model edit. Look how easily I was able to download 3 different Luxray models. It's not that hard to take a Luxray model, get a side view of it, and get a front view of it, and take a picture of that and model off it. For what it's worth, while the topology is similar, and probably certainly referenced from looking at the Luxray model, it does things slightly different that show competence in understanding what the hell they're creating. The fur is much more competently detailed and also modeled very well into the model to account for crunch points on the Palworld model. Well, the topology on the back of Luxray's tail kind of comes to a point here at the top with the fur in order to cut it off and kind of make a closed edge loop. The tail in the Palworld model doesn't. Lastly, while the paws are very similar, on the Pokemon model there's 2 faces going up the front line, while on the Palworld model there's only 1. It's possible to model edit this Luxray into the Palworld Electric Lion motherfucker here, but I don't know why you would. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't have started from this Luxray model anyway. Let me show you. Even though the topology would probably be not something you would edit into the other model, it's still extremely similar. To the point I would say that it's probably not too rash of an assumption to assume that the Luxray model was at least on the computer of whoever modeled this. A good example would be any Sonic the Hedgehog model. You know, there's multiple of them, but if somebody's already made Sonic before, why would you not look at Sonic when making your own Sonic? We also can't rule out the possibility that somebody might have converted this into some dynamic topology, done a little bit of sculpting, and then re-topologized. I messed around with the Luxray model for about 20 minutes with the same philosophy in mind, and it's certainly possible. At the very least, if I can get this close to the other model in 20 minutes, it's kind of hard to deny that these models are extremely similar in proportion and just overall stylization. But let me also make it clear I find it unrealistic that somebody would do what I'm doing here with this Luxray model. I am merely denoting the possibility. I'm not saying it's probable. Just one of those fringe examples that helps explain why definitives are impossible in this situation. It's much more likely that this is a new sculpt that just referenced the Luxray model a shit ton, and maybe the reference concept art itself was traced over an image of that model like I showed earlier. Or the artist was looking directly at this model from a side view when drawing their side view. Which could be a form of plagiarism. All of these could be a form of plagiarism, which is why I'm going to make a big distinction here. Plagiarism is subjective, not just in the court of public opinion, but in court itself. For this reason, you want to be very prepared if you're going to sue something like Palworld, if you're Nintendo. Or if you want to be specific, Nintendo, Pokemon Company, Game Freak, and Creatures Inc. What I'm trying to say is life is not like Ace Attorney, and this is not your normal cease and desist bullshit. A better defense in this instance is that while it's inarguable there are striking similarities in design, rest position, proportion, and placement of the limbs between both models, the actual mesh of this model itself is almost certainly not directly created from the topology of the original Pokemon model. If you were to ask me after spending some time with both models how this was created, I would wager its creation is either the result of a retopologized sculpt of the original model with notable modification, or is the result of a talented professional being given a model sheet that highly references or is directly drawn over the Luxray model in question. Once more, before we move on to the next model, let me clearly state, I am not giving my opinion on if that counts as plagiarization, as I am both not a lawyer and not well versed in Japanese copyright law, where this trial would certainly take place. No, Gyakuten Saibon does not count as a look into the Japanese legal system. Also, it's totally a stepladder. This is my last one, so this is going to be some rapid-fire random stuff that I wanted to talk about that I didn't want to make a full video on. Here we go. The PAL Hangyu was in controversy for apparently stealing the design of a creator named Pupae, Sate Pocha 1. As admitted by the artists themselves, this was a coincidence. They made their design a year ago, Palworld made this design 2 years ago. Just a misunderstanding happens all the time with character design. Palworld's little Chimecho clone is cleared. Xatu and Toko Toko have very similar colors, and theming, and species, and patterns. But it, along with many other Pokemon, are not covered in this video because it's not verbatim. There's gonna be similarities, but it's the same way that Freedom Planet is not plagiarizing from Sonic the Hedgehog. One of the internal file names for one of the pals is Fire Bambi, and I've been laughing about that this entire fucking recording session. I just wanted to share that. There are so many hands that go into each Palworld model, it's impossible to figure out, even if you do believe there's plagiarism somewhere, who is directly responsible. For that reason, please don't go harass people. Even if something is outright confirmed with one of these people, don't go shit on them. I can't stop you, but I can say in this video that I do not approve of any of that kind of shit from either side. And if you're pent up to the point of death threats over funny Pokemon game, touch grass type. Lastly, no, I cannot share these models. None of them are mine. Either wait patiently like everyone else for them to appear on the model's resource, or make a semi-viral video in which multiple people will call you a slurs for and then have it magically appear in your inbox. It's either one. Alright, I think it's time for the conclusion paragraph. Originally, I was going to choose a third Pokemon to look over here, but the more I looked, the more I realized that I'd just be saying the exact same thing that I said with Luxray for most of these. I could continue to talk about how interesting it is that Scorbunny and whatever the fuck this thing's name is happen to match up on multiple features, their length of their features, their density, their fucking everything when you scale them properly, which I will continue to remind people is absolutely fucking normal to do in this situation, I swear to God. But at this point, I've gone above and beyond what the original original comparison video did. I've shown things off to people that actually want to be educated and given reasonable explanations for both sides, trying to stay as unbiased as possible. And lastly, I believe I've responded to every single legitimate criticism that I've gotten directly. In conclusion, there are a lot of interesting similarities going on with the models from both the Pokemon games and the Palworld games when compared to each other that possibly raises some red flags, and I have, to the best of my ability, tried to provide a video explanation with a bit of commentary as to understand why things might look similar, why things might look different, and how those similarities and differences can be both intentional and unintentional. I'm sure this explanation, which I have tried very hard to get correctly, will be torn apart by both sides. Mainly because both sides seem to want to murder each other over a funny video game. As for me, I'm not on anybody's side. I think Scarlet and Violet is a terrible fucking game, that the Pokemon Company keeps forcing their employees to make heaps of shit in order to get stuff out quickly. And even whether or not there was plagiarism, I think Palworld is pretty impressive as just a feat of creation. There's no proven AI in it yet, so I might give it a try, I don't know. But only because I've got it on Game Pass, and that means I don't have to pay for it. If you'd like to send any complaints, please send them to Section 21, Grave 76A of the Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. Look for the grave that says Henry Kissinger. Now, if you excuse me, I'm off to go play Animal Crossing on my Nintendo 3DS.